Matthew, everyday audiophile, music lover, and as you can see, I'm in a different spot than normal. The camera is turned around, and now we're talking about my reference speaker, the Rega RS10. But before we do, as always, gotta open something. That was a quick one. So this is the Miracle Wheat by Hop and Sting. It's pretty basic. It's just a wheat ale that has like a blood orange. They use it while they're brewing. So it's kind of got that tangy flavor to it. But it's light. It's middle of the day. I still have some work to do later. So can you blame me? Anyways, I wanted to talk about the RS10. You don't see it a whole lot in media. It isn't talked a whole lot. In fact, the speaker, by and large, is a pretty rare speaker to see. This one is serial number in the mid-20s. So it's not like there's hundreds of pairs running around in the wild. And it has quite a storied history. And the reason I want to talk about it, though, is I have to take out all of these drivers. I am going to go have this veneer replaced. So I'm sending it to someone up in Tulsa. He's going to remove the veneer, put on a new one, as well as fix a few, in the process, fix a few visual artifacts that are the result of FedEx dropping this speaker, as FedEx does, unfortunately. All right, Rega RS10. Rega, obviously known for turntables, somewhat for their amplifiers as well, but not as much their speakers. The baby brother to this, which I actually have in the back of the room, you can usually see them in most of my videos, they share a lot in common with this, in that there is a transmission line design for the main big driver on the side. And in my opinion, it is a lovely low end to listen to. You're not going to get the bass thump that you would in, say, a bass reflex design, as in Rega's RS5, RS3s, their RX3 and 5, and then now their newer speakers that are all bass reflex. You're not going to get that mid-bass hump that kind of makes the speaker sound like it has more bass than it actually does. It's a little bit smoother and just a lot more dynamic in my opinion. It's a great thing to listen to if you ever have the opportunity to. But that's not the star of the show. The star is this BMR unit and this tweeter. The tweeter is unique to the RS10. It is a 3/4 inch tweeter that builds off of everything that they knew about tweeter design from the RS series. So it has what they call their zero rear reflection. So basically the internal cavity behind this tweeter is architected, sculpted in a way that you get zero reflections into the back of the tweeter on the inside, which does help with clarity. It makes for a high-end sparkle that isn't fatiguing, which to me is great. Love it. The BMR. This is, I believe, a 5-inch BMR, which is a balanced mode radiator. The thing that makes it special is that it is capable of reproducing a very wide frequency band. Whenever I have people over, I tell them, think of this as a full range driver, because that's really what it is. It is producing everything from 300 hertz, that is the lower crossover to the side units, to 6K. And that is a huge, it's basically the entire musical chain is coming from one driver. So it dominates the musical signature, and this has positives and negatives. I'll go over that in just a moment. But first, a little bit of refuel, and then we'll talk about these drivers on the side. Below 300 hertz, you go to these two drivers on the side, which are run in parallel. There is a 5-inch standard driver. I'll show a picture here somewhere. And an 8-inch. The 8-inch is the one that goes through the quarter wave transmission line and the 5 inches in its own sealed enclosure. And they're running parallel, and they just use the natural frequency roll off of the drivers to kind of blend them together. I personally like the way that this sounds. It means that even though these drivers on the side, I think it's a little weird. Whenever I first looked at the crossover, I was like, man, 300 hertz. So, 250, 200, you're really only getting that from these drivers on the side, and that's not quite directional enough. But it actually works. I don't feel like there's a missing bit of frequency response in that region, and I have graphs that I'll show here in a little bit to back that up. So I don't know how Rega did it. I guess they wouldn't have done it if it didn't work. They would have put this driver on the front, maybe above the BMR unit, but it worked, and that's great. The downside, though, to this parallel arrangement is that it is incredibly tough for a tube amp to drive. My EL84 monoblocks from Trial Lab, my reference tube amps that I love the way that they sound, they cannot drive this low end section on this speaker. It is too complex of a load. That's just the nature of it being parallel. So to get the best sound out of these speakers, I actually bi-amp them. I have an Illicit Mark III that runs the low end, and then the EL84 monoblocks run the mid and the highs, and it sounds great. No issues there. But now that we've talked about all the individual drivers, let's talk about how it sounds as a speaker on a whole. And let's start from that low end. Kind of have mentioned it previously here in the last couple of minutes, but the low end is a natural. It is British, which means that it's a little bit light, right? There are quite a few people that I think would listen to this and maybe prefer there to be a sub. I've gotten that comments a few times. This room is too small for a sub, so I just kind of have to deal with it. But the bass that it does have, it's very tactile. It's very fast. It is very much sounds like an extension of the speaker itself, and not like it's disjointed. Rega did a great job of blending them together. So no complaints there. Whenever I get these in a bigger room, I probably will add a sub, though that sub would only be from maybe 45 hertz and down, 50 hertz down. I don't want to overwhelm the signature of the speakers. That's just me, though. So moving on to the mid-range, I guess you could say lower mids into higher mids into highs, all of that out of the BMR. It's a bit conflicting, if I'm completely honest. And I mean this in a wonderful way for the speaker. The RS10's are very intimate in that you can hear all of the little details. They don't hide any of the flaws in the music, but compared to a more expensive traditional speaker, let's take Magico or Rockport or Wilson, for example, the soundstage on these left to right is almost without peer. They definitely stand up to those high-end speakers. You can very easily tell when someone's playing the drums. You can tell that, they hit it on this side of the drum versus this side of the drum. That's 6 inches, but you can hear that very, very easily. Where these fall a little bit short is that front to back soundstage. And there are ways to get to improve that. For example, when I had the Niagara 7000, it did a tremendous job of it increasing that front to back soundstage. I wasn't able to keep it, unfortunately, but it did teach me a lesson in that these speakers, you can solve those problems down the line. So, but getting back to it, that front to back, were a standard speaker of this similar MSRP, I would expect, it to be able to recreate 20 feet front to back, so way behind the speaker and a little bit forward of the speaker in addition. The RS10 only manages a few feet in front and a few feet behind. So we're talking 5 feet, 5 to 8 feet if you're really lucky. which could be, it gives you that sense that you are in the front row. And some people like how that sounds. It is especially wonderful if you're listening to jazz, which I have more recently gotten into, but for orchestral music, or some rock music, some folk. It's not quite as impressive. Or orchestral, it can almost pull it off, but it really sounded great with the Niagara. You kind of got that scale, but without it, it feels like you're listening to a miniature orchestra. You still have all the instruments; they're all still there. It's not quite, doesn't feel as grand. So you take what you can, but you do gain that incredible intimacy. For the right music, it is absolutely, in my mind, up there with the top dogs. It's just not as well-rounded of a speaker. And then we move on to the tweeter. And like I said before, it is a very clear tweeter to listen to. It's very easy to listen to since it is a soft dome. That personally is my favorite type of tweeter to listen to. And you do get that sense of air in everything that it plays. So really no issues there. The one big downside, and I've heard mixed reports on how sensitive the speaker is, but on my estimations, it's in the 86 to 87.5 dB efficiency, which is on the low end, right? My Q Acoustic Concept 500s downstairs, that's 91. I have a pair of bookshelves right here on the floor. Those are 82, so that's really on the low end. But most speakers that I own, most speakers that I listen to, most in the high-end category, they're sitting at 89 to 91. I feel like that is the kind of the Goldilocks zone. So these are on the low end. They're a little bit harder to drive, which means that the power requirements are just a bit up there. And that's all because of this BMR unit. Again, getting kind of that downside. BMRs, balance mode radiators, they're a fairly inefficient design. It's actually impressive that this one sits at about that 86 to 87.5 dB, because most of them sit at 84, sit at 85. And so you have to, through your crossover, bring everything down to that level. This tweeter is more efficient for sure. The mid-range units, these two units are the same ones that are used in the RS7, and that speaker is like 89 dB. So also through the crossover, they're bringing down the sensitivity of everything to match that BMR. And it has its cons, and it just means that you need more power. I haven't opened up the crossover network to look at it, but I will once the refinish on this is done. I haven't decided what finish I'm gonna do. We'll have to find out. But before I deliver it, I gotta take out the drivers. So after I finish this, I'm gonna take out the drivers. I'm gonna post them here in the video as well. But yeah, that's my review of the Rega RS10. It is truly my end game speaker. I wouldn't be re-veneering them if that wasn't the case. They may not get the love that the big players get nowadays, and they're definitely a flawed speaker. But they're a flawed speaker that keep my foot tapping. And really, at the end of the day, that's all you can ask for. But anyways, one last drink. Cheers, and I'll see y'all later.